There's a pattern in financial markets that repeats itself like clockwork. Every few decades, the global economy hits a reset button. Not because anyone wants it to, but because it has to. These aren't your garden variety corrections or bear markets. These are the big ones. The ones that reshape entire economic systems, wipe out fortunes, and fundamentally change how money works. Ray Dalio, founder of the world's largest hedge fund, calls these events the big cycle. And if history is any guide, we're about due for another one. In fact, the warning signs suggest that 2026 might be when the music stops. But before we can understand where we're headed, we need to look at where we've been. Because every reset follows the same playbook. Let's start with the granddaddy of them all, the Panic of 1907. Picture this. It's October 1907, and the United States is in full-blown financial cardiac arrest. A failed attempt to corner the copper market triggers a bank run that spreads like wildfire. Within days, trust companies and banks across New York are collapsing faster than dominoes. People are literally rioting in the streets to get their money out. The stock market crashes 50% in 3 weeks. And here's the kicker. There's no Federal Reserve yet. No lender of last resort. No safety net. Just pure, unadulterated panic. It took J.P. Morgan himself, the actual human being, to lock a bunch of bankers in his library and force them to bail out the failing institutions with their own money. The crisis was so severe that it directly led to the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. Reset number 1. The entire American banking system had to be redesigned from scratch. Fast forward to 1929. The Roaring Twenties were living up to their name. Stock prices had tripled in less than a decade. Everyone and their grandmother was buying stocks on margin, which meant they were borrowing money to gamble on the market.
The sky's the limit.
Sound familiar? The party was so good that economist Irving Fisher famously declared that stocks had reached a permanently high plateau just days before the crash. Spoiler alert, they had not. On October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday arrived. The market collapsed. But here's what most people don't know. The stock market crash wasn't actually the worst part. The real devastation came in the years that followed. By 1933, the unemployment rate hit 25%. 9,000 banks failed. Millions of people lost their entire life savings. The global economy contracted by 15%. And it took until 1954, 25 years later, for the market to fully recover. This wasn't just a crash. This was a complete economic reset that required a New Deal, the abandonment of the gold standard, and a world war to finally escape from. Then came the 1970s, an era so economically dysfunctional it got its own term, stagflation. Inflation and unemployment rising at the same time, which according to every economics textbook wasn't supposed to happen. But it did. In 1971, President Nixon did something unprecedented. He closed the gold window, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system that had governed global finance since World War II. For the first time in history, the world's reserve currency wasn't backed by anything tangible. It was just paper, just trust. This triggered a decade-long economic nightmare. Oil prices quadrupled after the OPEC embargo. Inflation hit 14%. Interest rates soared to 20%. The stock market went nowhere for an entire decade. By the time Paul Volcker was done raising rates to kill inflation, the economy had been through 2 brutal recessions. This was reset number 3. The entire global monetary system had to be rebuilt on a foundation of pure fiat currency. And we're still living in that system today. Let's not forget 2008, the financial crisis that nearly broke the world. For years, Wall Street had been playing financial Jenga with mortgage-backed securities. Banks were bundling subprime
Look how
mortgages,
safe it is!
slapping AAA ratings on them, and selling them as safe investments.
Such a great
It
deal!
was fraud dressed up as financial innovation. When the housing market finally cracked, the entire global financial system seized up like an engine without oil. Lehman Brothers collapsed.
is an
Bear
unprecedented
Stearns
crisis.
evaporated.
The collapse of Lehman and the
AIG
massive
needed a
injection into AIG
$180
marks a
billion
staggering moment in
bailout.
financial history.
The stock market dropped 57%. Unemployment doubled. And here's the truly terrifying part. We came within hours of a complete systemic collapse. ATMs nearly stopped working. The commercial paper market froze. Global trade almost ground to a halt. The response? Central banks printed more money in a few months than had existed in the entire previous decade. They dropped interest rates to zero and kept them there for 7 years. They invented quantitative easing, a fancy term for creating money out of thin air to buy government bonds. This was reset number 4. The emergency measures became permanent policy, and we fundamentally changed what central banking means. Now here's where it gets interesting. Each of these resets has something in common. They all follow the same pattern. First, there's a period of unprecedented prosperity and optimism. The economy is booming. Asset prices are soaring. Everyone's making money. Second, debt levels explode because cheap credit makes borrowing irresistible. Third, something breaks. A bank fails, a market crashes, a currency collapses. Fourth, the contagion spreads faster than anyone expected because everything in the financial system is connected. And fifth, the only way out is a fundamental reset of the rules. New institutions, new policies, new monetary systems. And if you look at where we are right now in 2025, we're checking every single box on that list. Global debt has hit $315 trillion, which is 333% of global GDP. That's the highest level in human history. Central banks spent the last 15 years printing money like it was monopoly currency. Asset prices, from stocks to real estate to art to cryptocurrencies, have been inflated to levels that would make the 1920s blush. But here's what makes 2026 different. This time, we're not dealing with just one bubble or one sector or one country. We're dealing with everything, all at once. The United States is running trillion-dollar deficits with no plan to stop. Social Security and Medicare are mathematically insolvent. The commercial real estate market is imploding as office buildings sit empty. Regional banks are sitting on hundreds of billions of unrealized losses. China's real estate sector, which represents 30% of their entire economy, is collapsing in slow motion. Japan is trapped in a debt spiral where they owe 264% of GDP. Europe is facing an energy crisis and a demographic time bomb simultaneously. And every major central bank is stuck between two impossible choices: keep rates high and crash the economy, or cut rates and let inflation run wild. There's no good option, only bad and worse. This is what Ray Dalio meant by the big cycle. When debt levels get this high, when asset bubbles get this extreme, when central banks run out of ammunition, the only way forward is through a reset. So what does the reset look like? Based on history, here's what we can expect. First, a trigger event. It could be a bank failure, a sovereign debt crisis, a geopolitical shock. The specific catalyst doesn't matter because when everything is this fragile, anything can start the avalanche.
50x leverage.
Second, a rapid cascade as leverage positions unwind and forced selling creates a doom loop. Third, emergency interventions that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. We're talking bail-ins instead of bailouts, capital controls, negative interest rates, potential central bank digital currencies that give governments unprecedented control over money. Fourth, a restructuring of the global financial system. Maybe it's a new Bretton Woods agreement. Maybe it's a shift away from the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Maybe it's a debt jubilee where trillions in obligations simply get erased. And fifth, a lost decade or more for anyone who doesn't see it coming. Because here's the harsh truth. Resets don't hurt everyone equally. They devastate the unprepared and create generational wealth for those positioned correctly. The signs are everywhere if you know where to look. Warren Buffett is sitting on $325 billion in cash, the most in Berkshire Hathaway's history. Billionaires are buying farmland and gold at record rates. Central banks have been net buyers of gold for 14 consecutive years. The bond market is flashing warning signals that even novice traders can see. Credit default swap spreads are widening. Yield curve inversions have predicted every recession for the past 50 years, and it inverted again. Corporate bankruptcies are accelerating. And perhaps most tellingly, there's an eerie calm in the markets. Volatility is suppressed. Complacency is everywhere. And as Mike Tyson once said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. The market hasn't been punched in the mouth yet, but 2026 is shaping up to be the year the punch lands. Because if there's one lesson from 1907, 1929, the 1970s, and 2008, it's this.
The reset always comes.
Not if, but when. And when it does, it doesn't ask permission. It doesn't send a courtesy email. It just shows up and changes everything. The only question is whether you'll be ready.